talk to you guys today a little bit and get you guys' feedback as well as share some of my story with you all. I am going to be talking today about my experience with my three pregnancies. My first pregnancy was a very scary experience. Not only that, my second one was as well, but my first one was more scary. I was pregnant back in 2002 with a little girl, and I was in a situation where I wasn't able to take care of myself, and my living environment just wasn't good at all. And I know for sure that environment plays a factor on your health and how you're able to take care of yourself if you're pregnant. And so during that time, I wasn't in a very good living situation. And I feel like that was the blame and the reason why I didn't carry my pregnancy successful. And I say that to say that I ended up being 14 weeks pregnant, I believe, 14 or 16. And I ended up actually having a stillborn birth. It was very, very hard for me. During that time, I wasn't educated enough to know what could have happened, what I could have done. Excuse me, Kai's in the background eating lunch, and I didn't know what was headed my way. It was like any other day. I just woke up. I had some cramps, and so that was normal. Now that I know, in these days and times, I know that that was normal, and but it wasn't like any other cramp. It was just like excruciating cramping, and I know TMI, but I felt like I had to have the biggest BM in the world, and so I went to the bathroom and tried to, take care of myself and do my business. And it actually turned out to where I had to have uh, it turned into um, bowel movements as well as puking, throwing up. And so I was like, okay, something's not right. These pains are not going away. And, I spoke with someone and I called the ambulance and I got, rushed to the hospital and, things like that. And, like I said, this is very TMI. And so once I got to the hospital, I was still in the same state, if not worse, not knowing to my knowledge at the time that those were contractions. And that's what it felt like to have contractions unmedicated. And boy, let me tell you, it was not a good experience for me. I was 22 years old. That was my first pregnancy. I actually got pregnant on the same time I lost my virginity, which was at 22 years old. And so it was very scary. It was like the biggest thing that's ever happened in my life, that was in my control. And it was very scary and very hard. And my hat goes off to anybody and my heart goes out to anyone that has had to deal with that because that was not an easy experience for me. So I got to the hospital and they told me, okay, well, we've calmed down your contractions and we will give you something to, keep the contractions calm. And the next day we'll stitch you up to where you can't, the baby won't be able to exit right away. You'll have time. And so that next day never came. Well, it came, but I had already had the baby. And so they had to call my doctor. My doctor had to come rushing in from home. And, they said, yeah, I guess they said the baby's, on its way. It's trying to come. We're having her not push, things like that. I wanted to push so bad, let me tell you. It was it was something that I wanted to push so bad to where I couldn't control it anymore. And the baby just came out. And, they ran and had to get another doctor because my doctor hadn't got there yet. And so they got another doctor. So here I am, having this baby and not knowing still, like I said, very uneducated at this point, not knowing that once I had the baby was not going to be living. I did not know of that until they dressed the baby, they, wrapped the baby up and did everything and brought the baby to me as if it was alive. And so I was very, very, shocked, that they told me that, so they went into telling me, taking me back to get, the afterbirth and things like that. And so once I got back, I held the baby, the father held the baby, my family was there, supportive as ever, and they were there for me. And so it was very hard. It was very hard for me. I laid on the couch and cried for like 3 months straight. I just couldn't get a grips on what had happened, why it had happened, and why it happened to me. And so those things happened, and, you know, long story short, I held the baby. They said, okay, well, you can't hold the baby for too long, because it's a dead, a not living, baby. And, it wasn't going to be good to hold the baby that long. And so I just, we did it for a couple, me and my, boyfriend at the time, we did it for a couple more minutes, and they came and took the baby from us. It was a little girl. We were able to tell that. And so I asked the nurse and the doctor, I said, well, can you guys at least tell me, what's happening, what's going to happen? At the time, like I said, I don't know anything of what's going on, what's going to take place. I said, what are you guys going to do with my baby? And the lady said, I cannot disclose of that information. And I said, well, what do you mean? It's my child. What do you mean? Are you guys, tell me simply, are you guys going to throw it in the garbage? Are you guys going to use it for experiment? Are you guys going to, like, what are you guys going to do? And they were like, well, we can't disclose that information. And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense considering it's something that's mine and it's not yours, and you're not telling me what you're going to do with it. And so at the time, I found out that there was actually something I could have done. Later on in life, I found out that there was actually something I could have done about that. They cannot keep that information. They were not supposed to keep that information away from me. And so when it's very hard to know what you can and can't do when you're not educating yourself on that situation. And like I said, nobody wakes up in their day saying, okay, well, I'm going to get dressed, because I'm going to have contractions here in a few hours and I'm going to be going to the hospital. My baby's not going to make it. And the doctor's going, nobody knows what their life is going to, how their life is going to play out from day to day. And so because of that, I didn't know what was, coming next. And so that was very hard for me. Like I said, I laid on the couch. It was a few days before Thanksgiving when I did actually have her. It was very hard for me uh, to accept this part of my life, and move on with it. You say hi. Say hi. Say hi, guys. Say hi, guys. Say hi, Baba. Say hi. Say hello. And so that was very hard for me. And so I was so petrified that every other pregnancy I would have, if I would have had any more, would have been this way, would have been the same way. I would have had a stillborn birth. Stillborn birth. Still not educated enough to know that, this only happens to one in so many people, and not to get too far along in the story, I, need to mention to you guys that they also, I asked them, my family even asked them, they said, well, what was the cause of her birth, her stillbirth? And they said, oh, it's an infection that, women get, that causes them to have high fever, vomiting, and, uncontrollable bowels. You say hi. Are you smiling? And, it's something that, it's something that happens. It just happens. There's no way to control it. It just happens. The only way they control it is, like I told you guys earlier, they would have stitched me up the next day, and, had me, you know, leave, and the baby would, everything would have been fine because the baby wouldn't have been able to exit so soon. And so, that alone was hard enough for me to be like, okay, you know what, fine, forget it. I'm not having no more kids. I'm not, I'm not taking that road no more. It's very scary. I don't want to deal with it. I didn't want the same thing to happen again. Not knowing that, like I said, this is something that happens ever so often. The same thing as miscarriages, except for the fact that miscarriages can happen back to back to back. A stillbirth, you have to be in pretty rough situations, I think, to have stillborn births. And then in some cases, you don't have to be. I don't know the facts on that as much as I do my own story. I read up on, things in particular that happened to me with my story. And so I don't know what anybody else has dealt with. So I'm not saying that what happened to me is the same thing that happens to everybody else. Everybody's story is different, and I'm not using my story to say that that's the way it happens. So don't quote me to think that I'm saying that this is the way everybody's life happens when they have pregnancies and stillbirths. And so that took a while. That took a big toll on me. And so 2015 comes around, and I had already been in a relationship for a year or so, and it was one of those things that before that time I had went to a doctor